I have to find this. So we go live in a few seconds. We always actually just sit here and get our stuff together.
All my onboarding, the new job is on Zoom, so it's been crazy.
And Lauren, are you now the host?
Yes, I am the host.
So restart recording and restart live, and I'm ready to go.
Okay, I'm going to click the button in 3, 2.
Hi, it's Marnita, and welcome to Weather Together. This is our 8th. I always have to look at Andrew, my producer. It's our 8th, right? We made it past 7.
Yes.
Most podcasts die before 7 podcasts. So this is podcast number 8 of our Weather Together series. We started it originally to have a conversation about how we could come together to weather COVID-19. But something else happened. We suddenly discovered, oh no, it wasn't sudden, and we didn't just discover it. We'd been knowing it for a while, to be honest. Do you ever notice how language, sometimes you say something, you realize, no, it wasn't actually sudden. Our guest today had been working on this issue for a long time. And we morphed it into a conversation called safer. And you'll notice we put the R in parentheses, because as a Black person in the United States, I don't ever really feel safe. I don't always feel safe to call the police if somebody's harming me. And I certainly don't feel safe always with my white neighbors. I was profiled recently at the dog park and the police were told that I was an out of control, angry, violent Black woman with 2 large dogs with blood on their muzzles that were viciously attacking other dogs. And I had 2 police cars pull up, one in front and one behind me, get out with hands on weapons. And I stepped forward and I said, hi, I'm Marnita. And thankfully the lead officer said, oh, Marnita of Marnita's Table? But what if that had been Lauren, our co-host today, who's 26 and my head of training? What if that had been my 26-year-old Black son, Elijah, walking with the dogs instead of me? I don't sleep so well anymore. That's why we are inviting both just everyday folks, but also leaders in our community to have a conversation about what really makes us safer in our communities. And we already have started collecting some data. The data says that in 1 year alone, in the top 10 police departments, well, it's not that they're not the top 10. I haven't even learned a way to say this. The 10 police departments in the United States, and one of them is in Minneapolis, spent $341 million in 1 year on wrongful police action. By the way, those were just what they paid. That doesn't include the people who didn't have the money to get an attorney or didn't have a case where they felt that they had any advocates. You can do a lot of money with $241 million. So the reason we have our guest today, and we always just start by having them introduce themselves, say their names, and then we have a little conversation and today's conversation about what it is to be safer. Please, if you're joining us on Facebook Live, please post questions that you think we should be asking in and of community about what makes us safer. We don't want to just reform. We want to build from the bottom up a truly safer system of public health and safety. So today, I'm so honored to welcome our guest. They're gonna say their own names, they're gonna tell you who they are, and we always start by answering one question, and the question we're answering today is, do you have one thing that makes you feel safe in your own community? What is it? So I'm gonna throw it, we always literally throw it. I'm gonna throw it to Marika. Here, Marika, what is one thing that makes you feel safe in your own community? And who are you? And why are you here at this table with me today? Oh, you're on mute.
Thanks, Marnita. That's a great way to start on mute. Yes, my name is Marika Fetherkorn, and I am the Solutions and Sustainability Officer.
You're talking really low. It's hard to hear you.
Hi. Is
That's
that better?
much better. Yay. We want to hear your beautiful
My
voice.
speaker. My name is Marika. I am the Solutions and Sustainability Officer at the Twin Cities Innovation Alliance and the Executive Director of the Midwest Center for School Transformation. Have been doing a lot of work around the cradle to prison algorithm, the school to prison pipeline, and school policing, police in schools most recently. But when I think about what makes my community feel safer, I live in Brooklyn Park, and I know almost absolutely every single one of my neighbors, and they know me, and they know a few things about me. And so we look out for each other, and we also are aware of our surroundings. And so we really have established what is a conscious community, folks that check in on each other and look out for each other. And so I think that is where I begin with my feeling of being safer, because I know that my neighbors will recognize who I am in the community.
And throw it to the next person you want to hear from.
And I want to throw it to Sam.
All right. I'm gonna catch it. All right. So, hey, everybody. Marika, first off, thank you for having me. My name is Sam Ndely. I am the Director for Employer Inclusivity at the Center for Economic Inclusion, and also co-founder of Gravity, which is an organization focused on helping get BIPOC entrepreneurs into the tech startup community here in the Twin Cities. And I guess what makes me feel safer in my community, I would agree with Marika, is knowing your neighbors. I know the person that lives next to me. I know the person that lives on the other side of me. So that really helps. I'm getting to know more people. I've only been in my apartment complex for about a year, but you know, still getting to know people, saying hi and introducing myself, just trying to make sure that they remember my face and they know who I am and know where I'm staying, so that way I'm not mistaken for anyone else. But yeah, it's a tough question to answer, right? Because even sometimes, you know, you never know if they may forget, or, you know, if somebody that they're with doesn't know who you are, and then like something happens. So there's just a bunch of different things you have to account for. But I guess that's just a little bit to help feel a little bit safer, just getting to know the people around you and really having to know who you are. So.
And throw it
And then,
on.
all right, so who else is participating? Is it just us two? I'm talking.
We all do. Lauren does and Andrew does.
Okay, so I'm gonna pass it over to Lauren then.
Hi, everyone. Oh, I caught it.
All right, good.
Lauren here, training director at Marnita's Table, and co-producer of this podcast. So I've given a couple of answers. Neighbors was my first answer. Business owners, knowing business owners in my community was my second answer. And I think today, what I'm feeling is events where you can get to know your neighbors, whether it's the farmers market or it's the block party, because our neighborhoods are turning over very quickly, and they don't look the same way that they did. So we have new neighbors all the time. And I think just feeling like I have a space to get to know those new people who move onto my block every single year is what's making me feel safe lately. And I will pass it to Andrew.
Thank you, Lauren. You stole what I was going to say. Events, as someone who loves hosting events, I'm going to dovetail off of that. I shared, you know, centered around food in our first Safer conversation, and then kind of a shared language, or just understanding that you don't know what the language and the intent behind someone's messaging is. That creates a safer space. That was kind of what I shared secondly. But to tail off of that, Lauren, I think interacting in an event where there's community, where there's people around a common good, whether it's just, you know, engaging with each other after work, or, you know, just being a participant in the community. The more events, the better. And it's really a sad time right now with COVID being, you know, putting up those walls and not having the ability to walk outside and feel confident engaging with someone because of spreading this pandemic. But I'm completely agree with you, Lauren. And we'll finish it off with you, Marnita. I'll throw it your way.
Thank you. Well, you know what makes me feel safer in my community? I don't know if I've ever felt safe. I've been saying this a lot lately, and I just had an experience recently with somebody in my own family who didn't really understand what I meant when I said it. I often start Andrew and Lauren, who are around me a lot, hear this all the time. I start almost every podcast with the same story. I was born in 1962, and in 17 states of the United States, my body was evidence of a felony. And in the other 33 states, really didn't care. And my white biological grandmother gave my white biological mother the choice of putting me into the foster care system or disowning her. So I was in 3 homes before I was 2.5 years old. And I tell that story. I recently told that story to, sadly enough, one of my brothers. And he came back, and he's a very conservative person. And he came back and he said, well, it doesn't matter how you were born, kind of thing. And like, even if you were a victim of, like, you were still born. And it was this whole thing about that I was ashamed of this. My point was, people make horrible laws that impact our bodies, and we should think about it. We should think about whether we are denying the rights to people denying rights for somebody to use a bathroom for our transgender. If you've never actually been denied the right to use a bathroom, I've been denied the right to use a bathroom. I was 5 years old. It was my very first birthday party. It was in a little town 60 miles north of Seattle called Arlington, Washington. And I was wearing a white dress that was green dotted Swiss. And I had little underpants that had ruffles, and I had little anklets with ruffles, and I had Mary Jane shoes, and I had a gift. And we lived in the country, and it was 1969. And your parent didn't walk you down the lane, right? They dropped you off on the country lane, and you walked down the long driveway. And I went down that long driveway, and I was so excited. I was 5 years old. I was just so excited to go to a birthday party. And I knocked on the door, and the mom opened the door, and she said, oh, the kids are out in the backyard. And she took the gift I had brought. And then the father came out, and he was the sheriff. And he looked at me, and he said, we don't allow, and I'm just going to say what he said to me. He said, we don't allow niggers in our house. And they put me on the front porch, and for 3 hours while the other kids played in the backyard, they didn't give me any water. And I hated wetting myself so badly that I potty trained myself at age 11 months because I didn't like diapers, and and they wouldn't let me use the bathroom. And every time I see a law that comes up about denying rights, basic human rights, using a bathroom is a basic human right, people. It's a basic human right. If you've never been denied use of a bathroom, when you're afraid and you're alone. So what makes me feel safer is having Marika and Sam and Lauren and Andrew as part of my community. That's what makes me feel better in my body. That's what makes me feel whole, is to be able to tell that story and not have somebody say, you just want somebody to feel sorry for you. Because I don't tell these stories so somebody feels sorry for me. I don't use my body as a jungle gym for white people to make people feel sorry for me. I use it hopefully so that somebody will wake up and recognize that right now we have state-sponsored violence against Black and brown people. We have children in cages at the border at this moment. We have for-profit foster care where children, Cornelius in Oklahoma, was put into a chokehold, where we have police officers in riot gear pepper spraying people who came out to play violins in a park after the police killed somebody. I tell these stories to hold up a light. And so I am safer because of you, Marika, and the work you do. I am safer because of the economic work that you are doing there, Sam, with Tawana and the team there. I am safer, Lauren, because I have you on my team. And I am safer to have you as my white ally, Andrew. And that's what makes me feel safer. And so now I'm just going to go, and we go up to our next questions. I always have to do this. I know what you see, I'm running around we do everything. So what we're trying to do is safer, just so you know, because you haven't really seen what we're up to. We want to move from reaction to proaction. and from theory to embodied practice. That's why I tell you stories about the bathroom. There can be no more personal act than going to the bathroom, right? And we're uncomfortable and we're embarrassed. Moving from theory, oh, what is anti-racism? It's a practice. It's something you wake up and you do it intentionally every day. And that's the work that Marika is doing. That is the work that Sam is doing. And we're doing everything right now. SAFER is about throwing off the shackles of state-sponsored violence against Black and brown people. It's as simple as that. That's the conversation we're having today. How do we throw off those shackles? And both Marika and Sam are involved in that work. And it's a bottom-up community-based response. Although Marnita's Table makes 70% of our income from somebody who hires us, we are asking all private donors and foundations so that we don't have to take money from the police department or the city or the school district, that the community, that we will convene on behalf of the community for your voices to be lifted up. And that's what a taste of this is today, because it is long past time for us to come together to reconceive public health and safety and what does it mean to be safer in our own communities. So our special guests again, Marika Pfefferkorn and Sam Ndely. Love you guys. And we are mashing up as part of this. You remember Decision Point, Marika?
Mm-hmm.
What a special day that was.
Yeah.
You know, and the amount of
That was
money
7 years ago.
that started, yeah.
That's crazy.
And we didn't get funding. At the time, we wanted $25,000 and they wouldn't refund it, even though it was such, so we have $241 million to spend on wrongful police action, but not $25,000 to bring people together in an effective method. And then, of course, some of you have been to our engage work, just in civic engagement or healing from trauma work, which we've been doing now for 5 years on building resilience in and with community, using culturally appropriate manners. If you know people like, if you know some of our work where, some of our leaders, Ihutu and other leaders are coming together to make sure we have culturally responsive ways to heal. And then if you don't know about building bridges and breaking bread on the 38th Street Bridge, where we are now doing giant events exactly where the federal highway system intentionally segregated neighborhoods. We're mashing all of those up to reimagine health and safety. And so, yay, I want to talk more about that and what we're doing, but also what you guys are up to. Just a reminder, Weather Together is open to the public, and we record this podcast episode both live on Facebook, and it'll be ready next Thursday and up at iTunes and at Spotify for you to share with your friends and family. So this is how it works, panel. We just have this list of questions up, and I go back and forth between our faces in this as we talk. And you get to choose whatever question you want and what solutions you want. You can take as long or as little as you want. You just throw it to the next person. We normally give more time after I do my little opening spiel to Sam and Marika, because Andrew, Lauren, and I are all regulars. So we really want to hear your voices and what you're up to. So here we go. Choose a question. I'm going to throw it to Sam. Choose a question. Which one of these questions would you like to answer? The next person can follow on what they said or choose another question. Got it? Go, Sam.
All right. Okay, so I guess I'll go ahead and answer. I'll answer question number 3. What isn't working? Because clearly we're at a point right now where you have a bunch of opinions about how we should address this issue in regards to building safer communities, right? Especially here in Minneapolis, where it's the epicenter of this entire movement and rebellion that we have against how we're policing in this country. So I feel that there's some education that needs to happen when it comes to the police and why the police are here. I feel that a lot of times we get caught up in the romanticization of policing, right? With what we see in movies and TV shows and good cops versus bad guys and cops and robbers. We play that as kids and different things like that. Different communities have different relationships with police officers. It's very clear. I think the thing that we need to recognize, though, is that the true history of the police was started as slave patrol. And with that being the case, the relationship between the police and a specific group of people, which we're going to talk about as the Black community and other communities of color, it hasn't been the same reality for that community as it has the white community. And so we're at a point now where everything's hitting ahead, and we have to make very important decisions on how do we move past that. Some people are saying that we need to abolish the entire structure and the entire police department all over the country. I'm not gonna lie to you, a part of me agrees with that, right? However, I also feel that we need to make sure that if we are going to do that, we have the solutions played out properly, and we know exactly what is gonna be the ways that we're gonna make sure that we're keeping our community safe. Some of the things that I've seen, though, I've seen the abolish the police conversation, and I've seen the defund police conversation. I feel like those two things are separate, right? I know that Marnita mentioned earlier that we have a lot of funding to invest into police departments for a specific, if it's different equipment that they're using that are militarized equipment, or hiring more police in poorer communities to crack down on crime. And part of my thinking is, when you look at the challenges that poor communities have versus communities that have wealth or affluence, it all comes down to resources. It all comes down to when you also look at the police that are in those communities that are wealthier, they also have relationships with the people that live in their communities, right? If we were asking people that how they felt safe in their community, if they lived in Edina or whatever it may be, they may say, well, I know all the people in law enforcement, I know people at City Hall, all those people kind of know each other a little bit more, right? It's not the same in poorer communities. So, but when you look at how the Minneapolis Police Department is set up, 80% of the police officers, they don't live in the city of Minneapolis. They're not living in the communities that they're policing, and they're not building relationships with those people. There are some cops that are doing that, though, and that's good. I know some of them personally that are, but a large majority of them aren't. And then when you look at the cases that have happened, the accountability is not there, right? So we need to focus on, like, how are we going to make sure that this case that just recently happened with George Floyd, how are we going to put pressure on everybody involved to make sure that they do the right thing? Because we cannot continue on like this, because we saw what happened after George Floyd was murdered. Everything changed, completely changed. And I think that now we need to talk about, as we're looking at reasons why people are calling the police, specifically on Black and brown people, how can the police 911 dispatch do a better job of disseminating what is a serious issue or what's not a serious issue, so that way the police aren't having to be involved anyway, or redirecting them to other services if it's somebody that's dealing with a mental health issue, a drug issue or whatnot. Nonviolent crimes are they're oftentimes too much called upon when it's pertaining to Black and brown people. And then that we see what the result happens, right? It's either excessive force or murder or some kind of an unnecessary incident happening. And so we have to make sure that we have mechanisms that do a better job of tracking those things, because we're at a point now where we are seeing, and even since George Floyd, there's been more murders that have happened. We've seen them. You know, you have the brother that was down in Atlanta that got shot in front of the Wendy's. You have the Elijah McClain incident happened last year, but the video just came out recently, and that one has hit me hard because he's anemic and he's in Colorado. You know how the weather is down there, and he was wearing a ski mask, and somebody was afraid because he looked suspicious. And if you listen to what he was saying, even that human compassion aspect is gone. And I don't know why that is the case when we're dealing in these situations when it's with Black and brown bodies. So I feel like when it comes to, at this point, I feel like I'm rambling, so I apologize, but it's just there's a lot of things that I'm feeling. So I want to be able to get everything out, but I want to be able to provide some kind of, I don't have all the solutions, but I want to provide as many suggestions as possible. I think at this point, while everybody's at home because they can't go anywhere else, just educate yourself on what's actually going on and actually open up your ears and listen, right? I think that's one first step too. I also feel that we also need to make sure that we are not getting caught up in the fact that just because we're saying defund the police, that doesn't mean that defund the police and abolish the police are two different conversations. So, and I think that there's things to look at in both of them, right? Policing, I think abolishing the police culture is probably the best way to put it, in my opinion, because the culture is really where the virus is. I think that there is law enforcement is even a term that is troubling to me, right? Because when you're talking about laws, there were laws that were created, like Jim Crow, that were not designed for Black people that police officers enforced, right? And how are we supposed to trust that that is gonna do anything better for us at this point, right? So there's a lot of players that need to make sure that are being involved in this process. We need to hold our lawmakers accountable. We need to get some of these laws changed. We need to also focus on getting the culture change within these systems. And we need to break down the romanticization of policing. I think it's just not effective. I mean, I'm seeing them cancel every police show left and right. Cops is off the air after 30 years. But that's not enough. That's not going to change. We've seen it's not changing how they're reacting to even peaceful protesters. So I'm just going to stop right there. I'll let Marika answer the next question, but I hope that people just, at the very least, just educate themselves.
Throw it.
Go ahead, Marika. I'm passing.
Okay, I got it. Thank you. So I mentioned earlier that I live in Brooklyn Park, where 43% of our budget actually goes to cover the police department. And so when I think about the conversations that have been happening about abolition and around defunding, I like to think of it more as a continuum. And so even if we defund the police, which means a realignment of resources to make sure that we're actually getting to the root cause of the issues. So there's the realignment, so there's the defunding, there's the demilitarizing, there's all these different political policy aspects that have given more control to police departments than they were ever intended to have. And I like to think Sam is speaking to the social conditioning that we have had with media and the police department and patriotism, all wrapped up in this really sweet little bow. Yep. And I think what we really need to do is deconstruct that conversation, because what I felt was a knee-jerk reaction to people saying abolish and defund without understanding the conversation. And it's really frustrating for people who have been having this conversation and asking for reform or for the abolition, that folks are saying, this is great, we should do this, but we really need to have a plan in place, because we've been having this conversation. We've been providing the alternatives this whole time, and still we're at the same place, whether it's the Minneapolis Police Department at large or where we have police in schools. And so I have to challenge our folks that are saying we need to take this slow, because we've taken it really slow. And as you can see, for me, it's a time where we actually have to take a stand about this, because we do not want another Black young man or Black young woman to die for us to get to the point where we fund and resource alternatives. But what I will say is that I want to actually go to the what's working piece. I don't want to get stuck in the quagmire we're in, because folks want to fight over definitions rather than actually thinking about being proactive than reactive. And that is, there is a really important and critical role that youth workers play in our community. And that over COVID and over the last several years, that there has been a defunding and a divestment in young people that are supporting young people. And so as I've looked at the COVID response, and I've looked at the response to George Floyd's murder and lynching, I think about this invisible role that youth workers have played to be in relationships, to be in conversation, to be out in the streets, to be in community. They are some of the folks that have been showing up, protecting businesses, neighborhoods, houses. And so already there is an alternative structure in place that gives us a foundation from which to build. whether it's inside of schools and removing the presence of police and replacing that with youth workers, or it's in partnership within community, with mental health workers, with youth workers, with elders, with healing practitioners, with restorative practitioners. And for us to have this conversation as if it's an either or minimizes all of our intelligence and our imagination for what needs to come next. And I'm deploring the conversations that we've been having because Marnita, I can't remember if you were at this table, but we had the Black Male Think Tank several years ago. And we asked the question, if we were to solve for all of the injustices and social inequities today in education, what would education look like on the other side?
I don't know if I was there. I think I've heard about it, but what were the answers? I'm curious. Like, did you get answers or?
I want to go back to my point of the lack of imagination, because people get so stuck in admiring the problem that they can't imagine and envision and create a different possibility. And I think that's where we're getting stuck right now in the conversation, that folks want to go back and forth about whether we're safe or not, rather than saying we haven't been safe, police have not been showing up in time, and when they have, we haven't felt safer. So the alternatives on the table require the resource and investment. We have all these solutions in play, but we also have to imagine, what does community look like without the presence of police in it? And it doesn't mean you have to agree with my vision for that, but it does mean we need to have the conversation and begin to have the conversation framed in that way versus everyone's gonna get hurt, we're gonna get murdered, because what I hear is fear mongering, not solutions to what we are presently experiencing on the ground in the community. And they're young people, they're adults and elders alike who are working toward this while we try to work it out on the policy side. And I will pass it to Andrew. Andrew, what would you like to say on this particular matter?
Well, I'd like to ask you a question, Marika. So with some of the policies that you're working with, what has been somewhat, like you're mentioning, kind of like the fear mongering, the putting up the walls of the lack of imagination and not appreciating like what these solutions could be like. What's like the number one thing coming with resistance, and how have you been able to kind of work through that or offer solutions to kind of open up the imagination of the people presenting the resistance?
Well, first it has to be a place of patience, because I do know that I have been in this work for a long time. So I need to unpack and understand where the fears are coming from. Because once they get past that language of defund or abolish and get to the conversation and the content underneath it, it changes the conversation. So what I heard immediately in a reaction from folks of leadership was like, I will never defund police. And then pushing back, and what does defunding police mean to you? Let's have that conversation. And then what happens with the resources, or what happens with the police department with decision? What are your concerns? And so again, we have been so polarized in these conversations that we can't even come to the agreement that what we want for ourselves is a safer community and imagining the other side. And then we just get caught in the definitions and the verbiage. So having conversations like these with folks that are on different ends of the spectrum. So I will also acknowledge for myself that this is not the place that I was in 6 years ago. I became a member of the Dignity in Schools campaign, and they had a Counselors Not Cops platform, which is also police-free schools. And I was like, oh, well, they have relationships with the police officers. They're more representative demographically, racially than the teachers and the counselors in the schools. We could try to put them in different uniforms. Oh, we could try different types of trainings. And so I was a person that understood that reform was necessary. And I am a person now that believes transformation is required for us to solve this. And so I want to use myself as an example of the journey that is necessary for us to get to the imagination on the other side. And I think that conversation begins with young people.
That's phenomenal. Thank you so much. Yes.
Love it.
I'm going to jump in because I have some, one of the things that I have to say is, we have a whole series called Healing from Trauma, which is actually part of our Safer platform. And, every person who opened this basically said their neighborhood, their community, their relationships, their connections, Marika and I met for fellowship a number of years ago, and we needed, by the way, it costs more now than it did 5 years ago, because I'm with Lissa Jones. We're a capitalistic society. What we value, we pay for, and so if you look at the weapons and the militarization of our police, I was really proud. For those of you who don't know my whole story, I was adopted by a very rural conservative white family. And I was born in the 1960s, and my brother, who's 73, who's white, in an ER doc in Seattle, and my sister, who is 78 and a public health expert in Portland, Oregon, both white people, were on the streets in Portland and Seattle with healthcare for Black Lives Matters. And they were texting me from the streets. They had their masks on, and they were talking. But first of all, they came to me as their younger sister, who's cross-racial, and apologized that I don't even think we realize how racialized our history is. So I keep recommending to anybody who hasn't read it, read White Rage. It's a very seminal book about just the interlocking laws. Like things that a lot of people say, oh, we want school choice. How come all schools aren't great? Like, why do we only rely on school choice for the parents who are in it, invested enough to pull their kids out of school? My parents didn't pay all that much to school. I got kicked out of the house in the morning. I came home. Like, I actually think that some of the things that we talk about are actually really racism hidden. That if you're working 3 minimum wage jobs, well, then that was a way for middle-class parents to say, oh, you aren't involved with your child's life. I don't want my children in that school, right? Like, so if you're a Black parent who can pull your kids out of school and take the time to get them in another school, but what about all those Black and brown kids in schools that aren't performing or do feel like prisons, right? I go out to the suburbs sometimes and I see these schools that look like college campuses with beautiful plants and swimming pools. And I went to high school in Portland, Oregon, in a really upscale neighborhood, Wilson High, in the Southwest Hills of Oregon, near Lake Oswego, which is a very rich neighborhood. And we had Olympic indoor and outdoor pools. We had a live TV station, radio station, and online news, not online, a newspaper that we ran when I was 14, and that was in the 1970s. That was the kind of school. But if you went to North Portland, that wasn't the school. And in fact, maybe the kids were good at sports, got something, right? And so that these things are hidden. They're not really hidden. We just like to pretend that that somehow, well, you have to be deserving. I just remember one day realizing that my 2 white sons were automatically assumed to be worthy of investment and valuable. And in fact, my Black child was assumed, like literally people would say, well, he must be taking the place of somebody better or smarter. Like it didn't matter he was reading at a college freshman level in kindergarten. It didn't matter that he had 10 points higher on his ACT than his white brothers. Nobody ever suggested that my 2 white children should not go to college. And it was I had to continually advocate for my Black child. And it became a tax on me. I was saying to Marika before like we got on air today, like, Sam, Marika, wouldn't we rather be doing, like, I'm a really good cook. If you've never had my cooking, I'm actually like, I could be running one of the hottest restaurants in town, right? Or I could be a Wolfgang Puck. I design clothes. I have other skills and talents, right? Like, this is a tax on me to have to ask to be safer in my community. And it's really sad when a police officer says, I'm so tired of white people who call the police on a Black person who isn't doing anything at all, and so, there's actually a whole Reddit thread on that. It's like police who are pissed off at white people or something. It's actually police officers who actually tape like, okay, I got called. Oh, Here's a black guy in his neighborhood where he's lived for 20 years fishing off the dock, and I got called by a new person in the neighborhood. Like, so this isn't just the police. This is about us feeling safer in our actual neighborhoods, in our bodies, and not having the worst assumed of us automatically. I've been telling people lately, I'm allergic to almost every form of alcohol and almost every single form of painkiller. And you know what? I'm having some, are you guys surprised me coming out of foster care that I might be suffering right now from some physical pain watching snuff films at Ahmaud Arbery running through his neighborhood, trying to stay healthy at 1 o'clock on an afternoon? Or I have a son named Elijah McGregor, who's 26. How close is that to Elijah McClain? Like, like I'm literally, so I feel pressure in my body, and I'm pointing out to people, guess what? If I get killed, you might find cannabis in my system. Does everybody think that Marnita should be, like, we find a way to criminalize people who have done nothing wrong all the time. And so I've been saying that. I used to be really worried that if I said that, somebody would say like, oh, Marnita's a horrible person. And I'm saying it now so that people like Sam and Marika would stand up and say, really? We really think Marnita wasn't a good citizen? Like, Marina, like, it's medicine. We're a medical state. Like, she can't take any painkiller. And like, you think that like some of the things that we just accept, and I call it accepting by accepting. I don't know if any of you have had this experience. I've had white people say to me, well, Marnita, you're different than other black people. And you start, what do you mean? Well, and you suddenly start hearing, you're not a drug addict, you're articulate, you work hard. Like, but here's the thing. Every black person on this show today is like me in that way, right? In fact, most of the black people I meet, the great majority of black people I meet are like me. But we've allowed white people not to expand their vision of what it is to be black or brown, right? Them meeting Sam, Marika, Lauren, me, doesn't say black people are excellent, valuable, we shouldn't only shop from one aisle of the grocery store. That means we're losing all this productivity and talent. I'm still offended that the Little Richard version of Tutti Frutti sold less than the Pat Boone version. Crime, like right there, like that is everything that's still wrong with the world. Like, we choose faux over real. So I'm going to choose a question. Do you have a role in making your community safe? Do you know what that role is? I'm throwing it to Lauren. We haven't heard from her for a minute.
Well, I actually wanted to respond to some of the things that I was hearing.
You can do anything you want. Guess what? Do you not know that you're at the table? There are no rules at the table other than to eat butter.
Well, I've answered these questions many a times, and I'm always taking feverish notes whenever we have guest speakers on, because everything that everyone says it's just a new perspective, and it's brilliant, and it's helping me piece together my thoughts and what I'm thinking. And Marika, one of the things that you said was about how people are rooted in fear, and I think that's very true. I think that a lot of people are rooting their thoughts and their ideas in fear, but I think that there's a place for exploration and ideation, but I also think that a lot of people have never had a space to express those fears, to get them out of their bodies. And I think that we need more spaces like that. I don't know if those two things can exist together, but I do think that they're both really necessary. I also was thinking about what you said, Sam, about romanticizing the police, and coincidentally, this past weekend, I watched Bad Boys for Life for the first time. And just some of the violent language and ideas and what they portrayed, it was way more triggering to my body than it probably would have been about 2 months ago.
Right.
And just this idea of this is what we're watching and this is what we see as normal, it kind of, I brought this up in another episode, but it hits home for me and my family, because a lot of the elders in my family love watching Westerns and they identify with the cowboys. And I'm like, wait. This doesn't make any sense. How are we identifying with our oppressors, I guess? And that's how powerful media is, in teaching you who you are and who you're not, but then also it educates you whether it's false or true. And I'm just thinking about like Law and Order, how most people think, oh, everyone goes to trial. Like, no, that's not the case. But of course, we've been brainwashed our entire lives through this media platform to think that that is the case. So yeah, you guys both really just got my mind jogging. So I appreciate it.
Before we jump over, I have two comments that are coming in on our Facebook watch. One is from Julia Dinsmore, who we all love. Hello, Julia, out in land, in Watchy land. We love you. And Julia says that poverty-informed people make me feel safer. People who understand what it's like to live in poverty, and people who know a little bit about that. And then Penny Snipper, who's another one of our leaders in the community, now living in California, had the honor of working with her with the St. Paul Foundation and other things. Hi, Penny, we love you. Marnita, too many people have said that to me. We don't think of you as yellow. Only time I feel safe now with COVID is when I'm out with my Jewish husband, because she is Asian. And so, and I have you've heard the story 1,000 times. My first date with my husband, I said, I'm a pissed off militant Black woman. And my husband, who's very chill, said, I'm a pinko commie Jew. We have a long history of alliances. And we've been together 20 years now. And I think Penny being an ally and Julia being an ally also makes us safer. I'm going to go back to some questions. And actually, Andrew, you always have good questions. Andrew wants to ask a question right now. I can tell.
Well,
I can feel it.
I can also feel that Sam was about to say something
Yes.
as well.
No, I was just going to respond to what Lauren said. Really more so about the whole fear aspect and also what happens a lot when we're talking about accountability when it comes to some of the incidences that have happened, when it comes to murders by the hands of law enforcement. And a response that is a natural response that's provided to the conversation is, what about, Black on Black crime, right? Which it blows my mind, because I feel like most people need to understand that most crimes happen due to proximity. And because we live in a country where a lot of our major cities are segregated, there's a lot of proximity with different races of people. And when you look at Black communities in larger cities, they're normally the most underfunded and under-resourced communities. And so you're going to see a lot more crime in those areas because of the situations that people are in. So it's not about Black on Black crime, it's more about proximity crime. And so you look at that being a combatant, and typically what happens whenever a crime is committed by a civilian to another civilian, the other person is arrested, they go to jail, they go to trial, and they're sentenced, right? When it's law enforcement, there are literally things set up to protect them from being accountable for their actions. And that is why it is not fair. So I wanted just to make that point very clear, because a lot of times we let that conversation distract us from what the actual problem is and what we're actually talking about. It's not about, saying that that crime in poor Black communities doesn't need to get better. Of course it does. Like, crime needs to get better everywhere, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen in poor white communities or doesn't happen anywhere else. And I'm saying, as far as violent crimes are concerned, right? With gun violence and things like that. We also have to look at, like, how do these guns get into these communities anyway? Like, what is the history behind that too, right? You talk about the war on drugs in the 80s and things like that. Like, that's what set a lot of this up. So there's a lot, again, education is huge. There's documentaries, there's books, there's a bunch of things that we don't learn in high school. We don't learn unless you majored in it in college. Like, you have to do the research yourself. You have to actually open up your mind and expand your thought process in regards to how we consume some of this information, because it's by design why it's not provided to us from K through 12, right? Even talking about, even when you say, Marnita, when you were talking about people giving you that response about not being like other Black people that they know, or you being different because of how you present yourself or whatever it may be. It's like, I mean, we what we consume on television, we see a lot of imagery, which is very important. Advertising is also very important. You talk about some of the stuff that's in music and whatnot. All of those things play factors into how we perceive different groups of people. If it's from a cultural standpoint, a religious standpoint, even different genders, right? Sexualization of women, sexualization of Black women, all of those different things play factors into like how we come up with our preconceived notions about people, right? And that unconscious bias piece. When you talk about white communities though, which are often very segregated, and there's not a lot of people of color within, you know, either wealthier white communities, what happens is a lot of their exposure to people of color is through the media, right? So that's how they generate their perceptions on our communities, right? And then oftentimes when they see somebody in person, a way to relate, they'll say something that's like has nothing to do with your entire life, right? They'll make a reference to a song that you may have heard or not, or you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's a very interesting experience. So I think that, you know, we need to make sure that, first off, you need to, if there's any advice to people, it's like, understand that when Black people in this country interact with white people more so on a regular basis than white people have to interact with Black people or any other minority group, right? Just because that's just how we have to do to survive. It's you know, we talk about wearing masks now because of COVID. Like we've been wearing masks our entire lives because we have to, you know, hide certain parts of ourselves in order to adjust into if it's me at work, or it's me in my neighborhood, or if it's me, you know, in another area, right? So that's tiring in itself. So wearing 2 masks is exhausting. And I've been wearing 2 masks for most of 2020. So I'm just like ready just to stop, you know? And I've told myself, and then one of the things that I'm fortunate enough to do with my job now is I don't have to necessarily wear a mask at work, because literally my job is to eliminate the whole point of wearing a mask. And so I can go into different companies and say, hey, this entire culture that you have is destructive to your bottom line, because if your employees are not performing at the highest level because they can't be themselves at work, or they're not giving their full because they're not able to be themselves, then how are you getting the most out of your employees? Or if you're not paying attention to different communities that are actually in growing demographics, you're missing out on potential customers, right? So these statements that are coming out from these companies about Black Lives Matter, they seem great on the surface, but the resources that these companies have, they need to make sure that they're putting their money and policy where their mouth is, right? Like being influential in how they are making change, you know, in
You know, Sam, that's a really good point. One of the young people, well, Elijah, who works on our team, pointed out that the Target in Uptown, for instance, it doesn't have very much in it. And apparently it is a loss prevention Target where they train all their loss prevention people. So it's an inner city Target. It's a central cities located Target where they train people to call the police, you know, on loss prevention for somebody stealing a pack of gum. That we don't even notice that some of these things are in our community, and the way that they're set up. I think you may have been here with me, Marika, too. I know it was the day that I was at the Humphrey and Lissa Jones got up and said, we're a capitalistic society. What we value, we pay for. So she was talking about how much we spend on stadiums and all sorts of things, right? But that we don't want kids to have swimming pools, or those are too luxury, like those kinds of things. And that, but a woman got up who, I can't remember her name, and I will try and get it and throw it up. It's such a resource. She was a PhD out of Harvard, a Black woman PhD who studied epidemiology and also violence. And it was like in any neighborhood, it was only like 20 houses that caused all the violence in the neighborhood. But the police as though every person is violent. And that, in fact, if you understood that something like 95% of all violent crime, other than robbery, actually happens between people who know each other, that you would police entirely differently. My brother even said, was it Brooks, his name, Rashad Brooks? Anyway, the person who got killed in Atlanta, you know, that should have been a public health worker who went and helped him walk it off and got home safe. Like, being drunk at 1 a.m. should not be a death sentence. So I'm going to throw it to Marika now, and have you say, I can see you've been writing notes. You're ready to go. You
I'm scribbling down because, again, we're talking about this, we're talking about a smaller group of people that have been impacted by the police. And so I think of this example. So been working down for years at the state legislature, trying to get them to address discipline disparities. And one of those discipline disparities is the overuse of police in schools. And so we've been down there forever. But until one of our Republican state legislators had his son interviewed by a police officer in the school, he didn't care about the role of SROs in school until it happened to his son, and his son was interviewed without his presence or knowledge. And so I think at this time, we need to flip the script and stop waiting for it to happen to us personally, for us to listen to the people that it is happening to. And I want to raise a concern, because as we address the root cause and the issues within policing, as we know with systemic racism and white supremacy, is that it evolves and it morphs. And so one of my concerns is, as we're having this conversation, the technology continues to emerge. And so policing doesn't necessarily have to be physical in nature, a physical police officer in the space, in order for this policing to become more expansive and criminalizing than ever. And so one of the things that I have really been focusing on specifically in the schools, but this speaks to what's happening in our community, is that emerging technological trend of using algorithms, big data, predictive analytics, social media monitoring, threat assessments. All of these are tools within the belt of a police state or a police system. And when you do not have the physical presence of police, they become even more invisible, and the ability to hold them accountable is almost completely absent. And so as we understand and redefine whether abolition works for you, if defunding police works for you, what we also have to focus on are the emerging technological trends that make policing non-physical, and who are the capitalistic companies who benefit from this shift in how we police, through surveillance, through closed circuit TV, all of these things, the intelligence department being on staff for social media monitoring. So again, there are companies that are going to swoop in and say, we've got the solution to your problem. We can address this through a pilot. You don't even have to put your budget forward. And boom, we've got an even bigger problem than we had, and it's more invisible than ever. And yet those disparities become and grow and expand. And so we got to get the conversation right about defunding and abolition, and the path that is already being paved by capitalism for this to be another opportunity.
And a couple things that I just to build on that was amazing, by the way. To build on that, two things that I just learned in the last week. One, I did not really know about the role of police foundations and their relationship with corporate America. You know, I thought police foundations were to raise money to fund uniforms for softball teams and to have, you know, parties in the park so that you had public safety, the things we were talking about, like what makes you safer, getting to know your neighbors. I thought the police were using their police dollars, but in fact, it's a private slush fund. It is a fund now, and some of these departments are getting huge dollars from corporations to fund surveillance techniques and tactics that if taxpayers were paying for it, we would never pay for it. And so it's just a private fund. And by the way, this is coupled with technology, like for those of us who are brown, when they built the technology to turn on water fountains and things with our skin, it's a light system.
Facial recognition.
And things like that. And it doesn't work the same on Black and brown people as it does on people where light bounces. And so we're getting mistaken for people, right? So
gender and race.
Gender and race. And then here was another thing that I just barely scraped this one, but I think it's really important. I have just learned that people commit armed robbery, what is taken from somebody from, say, like, oh, I stole a wallet or a purse, that corporations steal 10 times that amount in wage theft from their employees. Not paying overtime, not paying them for vacations, not, and guess what? There are no criminal penalties for stealing wages from your employees. And only if you, so here we have this police state set up, right? So somebody passing a $20 bill that might be counterfeit is considered this criminal, right? But a company stealing millions of dollars from their low wage workers in wage theft is not considered a crime. And remember, it is called white collar crime, but I really think the white is more important than the collar part of it. And so I just think that sometimes when we look at these things, Bernie Madoff, we're upset about a 16-year-old Black kid, right, who steals something, but we're not but a 42-year-old white man who does something, we say, well, he deserves another chance. Like just these narratives about who deserves a second chance, who deserves a first chance, who deserves investment. All these things are very, very complicated. So I want to just do one round robin before we do. I see everybody's brain exploding. I don't know if Andrew wants to ask another question. Marika, Sam, Lauren, who wants to just go next before we go to Circle Sharon? We have just a few minutes left, but I think the show is really important and people are checking in and watching and seem to be very much enjoying us. So that's the beauty of podcast. It can start and end, but we do have a close very soon. So Sam or Marika, do you want to just do like a little bit? I don't know if you want to play off that or you want to look at another question.
Yeah. I would say if we can put the questions up, that would be great.
I can do that. I will do that.
I can lead you in too, Sam, with a question.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm curious, you're 7 days, you're a week into this new position. Mm-hmm. What has it been like entering into a new role and knowing that you're doing so with the ability to make change? You're entering in, I don't know a lot about the Center for Economic Inclusion, but I'm just reading through the description a little bit, and what you've been articulating so far seems to fit exactly with what you want to be pursuing with this position. So I'm curious how you're feeling and what does that look like for you?
That's a great question. Thank you, Andrew. So prior to working at the center, I was at MEDA for the last 3 years as a business consultant, and MEDA is the Metropolitan Economic Development Association. And during my time there, I got to work with a lot of entrepreneurs of color, helping them grow their businesses, scaling and getting money, getting funded, different things like that. Loved my experience there. MEDA is a great organization. It's been around for almost 50 years now. And so they've done a lot to really help the community. But one of the challenges that I felt was there was still a lot of barriers that I had to help my clients navigate through because of the way that the system was set up. And when I started realizing, I was like, well, the system was never set up for minority entrepreneurs to be successful anyway. And so I guess the opportunity to work at the center allows me to help change that system, right? And help be a place that's going to push for true systems change when it comes to from a racial equity lens. So my first weekend, it was really funny. I was in orientation and or my onboarding all through Zoom, right? Because COVID, but but I was we're going through some of our onboarding, and one of the things that they distinguished was like we're not necessarily focused on D&I. We're focused on racial equity, right? We want to be able to provide solutions to the public and private sector that eradicate and dismantle systematic racism that will help build a more inclusive economy for everybody. That's what they're focused on. So I think that approach speaks very well to me because I do feel that racial equity in this country is what's holding us back from truly reaching our full potential. And if we can make sure that everybody has an opportunity to be successful without any of those initial barriers in front of them, then we're going to see a lot more millionaires and billionaires from different races and backgrounds and start to build some true wealth for families moving forward. And I'm excited about that. And I do think that entrepreneurship is a very, very important way to do that. And luckily, because of my experience working with entrepreneurs, I still get to do that with my new role as well too, helping entrepreneurs get contracts with some of these larger companies who haven't had a lot of spend with minority businesses at all, you know, or don't track it to even know like what they're spending. So that's what I'm excited to be able to get to start to help establish with some of these businesses. Being a weekend has been great. I mean, I'm just blessed enough to even be able to get a job during this time when a lot of people don't have jobs right now or have been furloughed and things like that. So that is a blessing, and I don't take that lightly at all. I'm very appreciative of the opportunity. So, but I just look forward to being able to continue, you know, addressing some of these issues that are going on, because I see everything. I consume a lot of news and information, and I'm sharing a lot of things online and trying to make sure people understand what's really going on. And it gets draining at times, right? So and then I would only imagine how frustrating it would be for me if I would see all that as a Black man and consume all that information and speak out against it with all the other things I do outside of work, but then have to go to work and I'm in an environment where everybody else doesn't even know what's going on, or they're completely ignoring what's really going on in my world even, right? Because we live in different worlds in this country, right? Everybody has different experiences, and some people just are oblivious to the challenges that other people face. But when I go to work, we're fighting. You know what I'm saying? We're not fighting each other. We're fighting what's going on out there in the world and trying to make things better. So that's what I like about it.
Want to do 1, 2 real quick, Marika?
The questions?
Well, here, I'm going to put them back up. I was actually just thinking that you might just want to talk a little bit more about your work at Twin Cities Innovation.
Oh, certainly. Yeah.
We want to hear more about your actual transactional role in the world, not just your amazing transformational role in the world.
So the Twin Cities Innovation Alliance, I launched it with my business partner, Awesome Shabazz, and it was really a response to a self-determined model of bringing really talented, creative, innovative, entrepreneurial people together to think about what are the solutions that we need for this time. And so we actually landed on working on smart cities, connected communities. So that really is around the technology, the data, the governance, the transportation, how all these systems work together, and how we can make sure that as decisions are being made around technology, governance, and again, all these pieces, that particular communities are not left behind, and that they are not just the end users of this innovation and creation, but they are the designers, they are the purveyors, they are the artists that are creating it. And then a smaller piece of that work is the Midwest Center for School Transformation. And it's in that space where we work on addressing the school to prison pipeline, the cradle to prison algorithm, where we're addressing big data, predictive analytics, and algorithms in education. And our work really has shifted to data for public good. And we actually have a conference coming up November 5th, 6th, and 7th in partnership with the Science Museum, where we will be highlighting a number of our pieces of work that we've been doing research around emerging technological trends in education. We'll be bringing in experts from around the country so we can have a deeper dive in a conversation about what it really means to have good data that reflects the experiences and the unique nature of who we are as human beings. And so that's what we do. And we also, just since we're live on Facebook, we have a youth-led response to the murder of George Floyd, where we have a fundraiser on the GoFundMe page. And so we're also working to support young people as they're building out and creating a newer response so that they feel safe to go back to school, so they feel safe in their communities, so that their voice is heard and amplified. And so really my role in this work is about creating space for these really talented, creative people to get the job done.
And one of the things that's amazing, I'm going to tell a little story, Marika, and you are very instrumental in the story. So a number of years ago, we were hired by the Wilder Foundation in Ramsey County to look at where gaps were in where young people were falling through the cracks. And they wanted us to bring together about 400 people, particularly, and at least half of them they wanted to be of color. And we brought together over 900 people, and about 700 of them were of color. And they were, as our usual, more than 51% of them were immigrant or of color, and 33% of them were under the age of 24. And Marika participated, many people participated in the community. We had a visioning process. We came up with very concrete ideas. One of them was to start piloting. We discovered that youth were falling through the cracks, that if you didn't have a B+ or higher average, you couldn't play sports. And all the rec centers, once you hit 6th grade, you no longer had a place to go after school. So we recommended that they open some of the rec centers and have more like things to do, homework help, stuff that kids, that while their parents were working low-wage jobs, had a place to go. And everybody said they didn't have money or whatever to do that. And we turned over a report and we said to them, can we release it to the public? And at the time, by the way, we changed our practices because of this. We turned over the report. Somewhere buried in the data of what people said in the room, somebody said, oh, and we could work better with the police. They pulled that one line out of how many pages Marika read the report. It was not we should do a joint powers board and do data analytics on predictive analytics to see whether kids were struggling at home so they could put them and flag them as being potential problems. When they came out with the joint powers board, Marika was instrumental and basically saying, hey, wait, what the hell? Then the county came back and basically said, well, we can do more listening sessions. And this is where it got good. Marika wrote one of the best op-eds I've ever read that actually ran in the Star Tribune. And she said the problem was not the listening sessions. They kind of threw Marnita's table under the bus, like, oh, and Marika and others, in fact, Beverly Bushy, like people who had read the report, and Antonio Wilcoxon had read this report, knew what was in it. They pulled it out of a drawer and said, Marnita's table, we were in those rooms. We heard what was said. They did not recommend data analytics. That was, none of the community did it, nor did Marnita's table. We have the report. And it was really interesting because, again, we were very exhaustive in our work, right? Marika, and it was great conversation. Like some of the things that came out of that was, there was at one point a conversation at one of the tables where the county library was in the room for Ramsey County, and then 3 other service agencies. And they were discovering that homeless often went to the libraries to use the restrooms. And instead of trying to kick them out, they just through this one table, they came up with all sorts of Wednesday supportive services in the libraries. Instead of saying you couldn't use it, they were like, okay, why don't we bring towelettes? Why don't we bring stuff so that somebody could, like, we understand this is needed. And I still want to thank Marika for that all these years later, because because they didn't split you and I up, Marika, they couldn't play us, and that often happens. Powerful leaders of color get played against each other, right? Where I know, Desiree Lynn Cole and Tara Cole and Andrea Jenkins and you and Sam and, we all, oh, there's only a little pot of money. Oh, you all have to compete for it. But you know what? What you're doing is very powerful work, and we need it. Just like our building resilience and our healing from trauma and our safer, those aren't in competition. Those are in competition, right?
Yes.
Those are.
And I just want to say that those recommendations, while they were not initially used by Ramsey County and St. Paul Public Schools, they have revisited them since then. Because Inequality did a report on your recommendations from your report to lift up those suggestions. And so the county is actually considering them now. We just had to go through this really interesting process to get to the point we should have been at originally with the same type of investment and resources. So thank you for holding it down with the community to get that information out. That's the data for public good that we can actually drive decisions making with.
So I want to show you this, and this is very much directly out of the work that we did together. And I just wanted to show you guys this because it's actually kind of cool. So Marnita's table realized we are never going to give, even if a client hires us, they have to make everything that is covered. The rooms are public. Why are they taking the data and hiding it, right? And so we actually built this. This is going to launch soon. But when we do an event, we actually now post who was, so you can see, was it the community? Was it represented? Oh, why did you go away? Was it? And if you'll notice, you're talking about younger leaders, we hand the mic. Look at this. Do you think this young woman actually, this little girl knows what's happening? This person is participating in this conversation, right? This is not somebody just sitting back. So this was in Eastern Carver County. This is what our rooms look like in case you've never been in one of our rooms. They feel really good for people of color, right? Like this is a space, but then we actually pull out all of the data from it, and we no longer are allowing clients to wall it off. We actually, so now you can see what they said they wanted. They said, you know, how many participants did they want to attend? What were the outcomes? So even if the entity that brings us in doesn't use it, the community itself has access to that data and can use it. We are really a research house. We aren't just a convener. We are a social capital incubator. And I now need to go to Circle Sharon. This has been, I hope that you guys enjoyed your conversation with us, by the way. I hope you are. We're really enjoying having you. I hope you'll also come back. But I wanted to show you that, Marika, because that was Marnita's table response. We were like, oh no, you didn't. Because it was very scary as a small nonprofit to have suddenly our name was all over the media. And quite frankly, Marika, you really stood up and said, it wasn't just you, like Anthony, there were people who stood up and said we were in those rooms and did not let us get thrown under the bus. So again, what made us safer? Our community. It wasn't this system. We reinvented the system. And so we do have some wins. We do have some power. And as we close all Marnita's Table events, we go to Circle Sharon now and we close. I'm going to throw it first to Lauren. What is one hope you have for your community? And you can say the same answer every time, people. Sometimes people need to hear things more than once.
I loved our guests today. I am totally fangirling over both of you right now. And my hope for my community is that people will know when to lead and when to follow. Yeah, you guys said some incredible things today, and I'm definitely following your lead. So thank you. And I'll pass it to Andrew.
Thank you, Lauren. And again, dovetailing off Lauren, you guys were awesome. Marnita kind of sidebarred, was like, don't you just love my guests? And I'm like, it continues to impress me who Marnita can bring into the conversation and allow the space for them to, you know, create this community that isn't necessarily out there enough. So thank you guys for being transparent and being honest. You guys provide a lot of hope for me. And I will pass it to Sam.
All right. First and foremost, my hope is that they arrest the cops that murdered Breonna Taylor and Elijah McClain and everybody else that has not been arrested. So I want to see some true accountability when it comes to police-involved murders on unarmed and innocent citizens. And then also, I would echo what Lauren said. I think we need to do more listening, and people need to understand when to lead and when to follow. I know that as I'm involved in a lot of work where we have to lead and try and come up with solutions, I want to make sure that I'm always still listening to different perspectives and different people's opinions on how things are the way they are. So at least that way I know how to navigate it based off of my own personal experiences. So.
And throw it on. We have one
Oh
more.
yeah, throw it on to Marnita. My bad.
It was Marika. Oh, you were doing me. Oh, you were doing me. I'm so used to people illustrated to somebody else. You know what? My hope is that, well, first of all, my big hope is that you'll both come back and join me again, because you've been excellent guests. Because I really do want to, this is not a one-time thing. It's not a one and done, right? I think all of us are doing the work and we need to have our voices lifted up. And so my hope is that there are more allies, that we get more people in this fight who really engage it at a deeper level and don't just have easy these are complicated technical answers. Like my body is evidence of both the oppressor and the oppressed, right? My mocha latte skin is evidence of that. And so my hope is that we actually also have a little fun along the way, that we get a chance to maybe have a little bit of strawberry shortcake every once in a while and have some fun, because this has been a lot of work. And so not this conversation, but the living in a black skin in a white supremacist world. My hope is to dismantle white supremacy. That's my ultimate hope. And I'm going to throw it to Marika. What's your hope?
Thank you. I hope for all of your things to come true. And I hope that there is more space for young people to talk about what is happening in our community. I felt like there was an absence of youth voice during and following the murder of George Floyd. And in the words of Dave Chappelle, I just want to share this with you all. I want to shout out to all the young people who have had the courage to go out and do this amazing work protesting. I'm very proud of you. You kids are excellent drivers. I am comfortable in the back seat of the car, so carry on, young ones. And that is meant in the least patronizing way, although, you know, it's permission and young ones and kiddos. But the point is, I'm willing to take the back seat, and my hope for you is that you will hold on for dear life and drive us forward.
Thank you so much, Sam Ndely. Thank you so much, Marika Pfefferkorn. And of course, our producers, Lauren and Andrew. This has been a wonderful conversation. I have to say, Marika, we have a 14-year-old out of LA named Carlo Kim, who actually is our co-host sometimes. And he was sick today and he couldn't be with us, but he is the son of Rebecca Riley, who was a former deputy public defender for LA County. And his uncle is Boots Riley out of Oakland. This young person, Lauren was just sitting in the chat going, Carlo, we were literally, Andrew, the three of us were literally like, so we want to have you back specifically, Marika, and we'll have some more young people on, just because we know, and we had really fun. That was Kim Ellison last week and Carlo. And in fact, in the middle of it, like, I need you on all the time. So if you have young people, by the way, we have a community cast on Wednesday night that is specifically to lift up the voices of Black and brown youth of color, Black and brown youth. I guess if they're Black or brown, they are of color. You know, I get redundant and a little crazy sometimes. So I just want to thank you so much for coming. Andrew, thank you so much for everything you're doing for us. We love the Back Pocket. I want to tell you, and by the way, Marika, the Back Pocket, it's kind of funny. We tell the story a lot. So the Back Pocket is now on, I don't know, podcast 281 or something. And the Back Pocket is on like 281. And Ndely, who now works for us, meets Andrew, and she's like, you know, I low-key been going to the Back Pocket and just like alive going like, where are your people of color? Like, you're too white men, what are you doing? And so Andrew and Declan really stepped into this. And if you're out there and you want a voice, Andrew and Declan are willing to help kind of on a sliding scale, particularly for Black and brown people who need a podcast or need a platform. Andrew and Declan are partnering with us. This is what it looks like to share resources, to build one unified community. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Marika. Thank you, Lauren, Andrew, and all of you out there, Julia, Penny, all of our guests who have been following, asking questions. It was wonderful, wonderful to have you. I'm Marnita of Marnita's Table. If you want more information, go to marnitastable.org or info@marnitastable.org. Within the next 2 days, I know Marika and Sam will send us links to their organizations if you want to know more about them. We like to be able to expand. Marika, we want to make sure that we promote on the Facebook page the event in November. If there's something that Marnita's Table could do, or if you want me to convene something or hold space for something around the technology, this is called DISI, Digital Intentional Social Interaction. So if there's ways that we can partner, we'd be very open to it. It's been an honor. Thank you so much, audience at Facebook Live. Thank you, Back Pocket. Thank you, listeners. A biento.
Bye.
And we can stop recording.